Hi everyone, welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. Now today I've got Danny Rahm in this show, and he is a TV producer, he's a screenwriter, he's got lots of famous friends, so we've got quite an interesting conversation talking about all of those things. Now his book, The Long Branch, has just come out recently and it's doing really well. And I think it's fascinating to hear his process about how he wrote the book, about how he produces writing for TV, about how he manages that process of flipping between being a TV writer and a book writer. So there's loads of interesting tidbits. And if you are interested in writing for TV, or you've thought about maybe my book one day could go to TV, then you're going to get loads of it out of this episode. So I think you're going to find it very interesting. So yeah, check out his book in the show notes, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi everybody, and welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. I'm Teddy, and I'm really happy to be here with Dan Rahm, who's a writer, a producer, and now an author of his first book, The Long Branch. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Teddy. Good to be here.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. So it's great to chat to you. In our talk before, we talked a lot about your career in television and producing. That's really exciting. I don't get to speak to many TV producers very often.
Yeah,
tell me a bit about that.
Well, it's funny because I didn't start out that way. I didn't go to school for it. I never went to college. I sort of kind of fell into it because for most of my life, in the United States, I'm from the middle of the country, Missouri,
right,
and moved to California when I was about 19. And I had been doing, laborious work like construction most of my teen years, summers and things like that. And when I moved out here, I did the same thing. And I just kept doing that. And I did that all the way up until about 2000, 2001. I had met the actor Joe Mantegna by going to his house to do some work on his house. And, you probably know him from Criminal Minds most recently. And we just kind of struck up a friendship. It's hard to explain how or why. I mean, I think sometimes things are just kind of meant to be, but we sort of struck up this friendship. And after about 2 years of knowing him, he decided that he, wanted to get away from doing film and theater, Broadway, and wanted to do a television series because his kids were getting older and it was harder to travel to a location with them for extended periods of time. So he decided that he wanted to do a TV series, and he asked me to come work for him. So I was like, well, sure,
Sounds a bit like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like that
kind
film.
of.
Yeah.
I think what I always think is, and I've talked to him about this, I think he and I both were looking for a change around the same time. So he was looking to change what he was doing in terms of doing television for the first time, a series for the first time, rather than film or Broadway. And I was looking to move out of what I had been doing most of my life into something that I thought would be more fun and more creative and at least more exciting, and I certainly wouldn't sweat as much. So that's how that
be a terrible laborer.
Yeah. That's how I made that leap, that transition. And then over that, the other little bit to that is before I knew Joe, I had written a script just to see if I could do it on the life of Sammy Davis Jr. Yeah, just for fun. I'd read the autobiography of Sammy Davis Jr.
Okay.
And I was so moved by the book that I thought, wow, this should be a movie. So I thought, well, I'll make it into a movie myself,
Yeah.
So I bought a book on screenwriting and I bought some software and I went to it and I wrote this script that later he read and said, this isn't bad. Is this something you want to do, writing? I didn't know because no one had ever asked me that question. I had never asked myself. I sort of said, yeah, I think so. I enjoyed it, So that's where our relationship kind of changed, and he started to become more of a mentor to me after that.
Right.
I started reading a lot of scripts that were submitted to him, and I started writing things on the spec, just to see if I could, can you write an episode of Friends? Can you write an episode of NYPD Blue or whatever was on TV at the time? So I started doing a lot of that. And I learned a lot by reading a lot of scripts and practicing the writing. And of course, with Joe's notes and guidance as well. And then, now you skip to 2024 and, I've created and written TV shows. I've written for Criminal Minds. I've had two or three pilots sold. It's been a great ride, an unexpected ride for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's such a good story. It's the sort of thing you sort of think only happens to other people. It's like, just met this guy and he decided to sponsor me.
Yeah. Well, only in Hollywood. I always joke that, You meet one guy, he's got a beautiful house and a big swimming pool, and you say, "My God, what do you do for a living?" He says, "Well, I went to Harvard and I became this incredible lawyer and da 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 da, and I built this empire from my law practice." And right next door, same size house with a big pool. You say, "What do you do?" And he says, "Well, I used to be Arnold Schwarzenegger's handyman, and
Yeah.
then I came up with, I mean, that's Hollywood. Like anybody can be anything in Hollywood. It's wonderful."
Yeah. Amazing. And so the stuff you learned from like all that experience with the TV writing and the producing, did any of
Yeah.
that stuff help you to write your book, or did any of it affect the way you approached writing your book?
Yes to both questions. So initially, the reason that the book even came up was I had been approached by a network that I'd done some work for in the past, and they said, we're thinking about doing a scripted drama. Do you have any ideas?
Yep.
So I presented them three different ideas, completely different ideas, and they picked one, which was a good idea, but I thought this other one was a better idea. So the one that they picked, I did some more development with them on that, and then nothing ever happened with it, which is very often the case in writing. But this other idea that ended up becoming this book, I couldn't shake the idea. And so this is like sort of towards the end of COVID. This is like around middle of 2022. So there wasn't a lot of TV production going on, so I had time, and I would just work on it a little bit every day, thinking like maybe this is a book. Maybe I could just turn this into a novel. And I just kept going, and I didn't really tell anyone except my wife, because you don't want to brag to all your friends like, "Oh, I'm writing a novel," and then you get to page 100 and you're like, I give up, I quit. Then
Yeah, you
gotta
shouldn't tell people so
everybody,
it's done, should you? Like,
yeah, like I'm not doing a novel now. I've changed my mind.
yeah,
So I just didn't tell anyone. And also, I'm a firm believer in, not everybody is really on your side. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
not everyone's rooting for you, even though they might say they are. They're not really rooting for you. And I think any kind of art, whether it's writing or painting or singing or anything, it's a very vulnerable thing in that process. When you're sort
yeah,
of trying to, do your thing, the last thing you need is somebody coming along who probably has never accomplished anything, telling you you're wrong or you're no good.
yeah,
So I just didn't tell anybody.
yeah,
Once it was done, yeah. Once it was done, I shared it with a few friends, and everyone responded so positively, and including Joe, that I thought, well, because then after, of course, COVID was over, there was a writer's strike in the U.S., and so there
yeah,
was 6 months of no work again. So all of that gave me the time to write the book, and so that's kind of how it was born. Out of a
yeah.
failed TV pilot.
Hmm. But did your experience, like as a TV writer, did any of the techniques or the ways you write, did that have any help towards your book writing, or even the other way around as well? Has any of the writing the book helped you with the TV work?
I would say the what you said first, because I found writing a novel very liberating, because when you write for television, first of all, television is a visual medium, so you don't go into a lot of detail and things. You might say, he lives in a rundown hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to say, because the art department and the set decorators and the location scout, they're all going to put their art into that description, right?
Right.
But if you're just reading it and it's not visual, then I have to describe it's a rundown hotel room with cockroaches on the walls and dirty sheets and whatever it is. You have to explain it more. So that's one thing that it's but what's liberating about it is there's all these filters that you have to run a script through for television. Is it too rude? Is the language, is it a period piece? Is it too violent? Is it all these things that networks kind of look at and decide, like, is this a right fit for their network or not? When you write a book, there's no limitation. You can say, well, they went to the moon, and on the moon they found, and nobody's going to question it. But so a very famous writer, I can't think of his name off the top of my head, he said, if you find yourself starting a screenplay with "on the way to Mars," you're done. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, no one's going to put a budget forward for that.
Yeah. But to answer your question, one thing I did try to do in the book, and I think it worked because of the feedback I've gotten, when you write a screenplay or you write a teleplay, there's act breaks. Like for television, it's commercial breaks. Every so
Yep.
often, you got a break for a commercial. So the trick in writing television is that when you get to that commercial break, you got to do something so that the audience goes, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? I have to watch. I have to wait for these commercials to be over so I can see what happens next." So I sort of tried to employ that technique in each chapter, so that when you
Right.
get to the end of a chapter, you're, "Oh man, I wonder what happens next."
Yes.
People have said that to me. I said, I get to the end of the chapter, I can't put it down, and I've had more than a few people say to me, like, I stayed up super late to try to finish it because I just had to know what was going on, and
Yeah,
so I guess it
nearly
worked.
each chapter has like little cliffhangers that kind of want you to keep reading on. I really enjoyed that about the book because it kind of keeps that pace really, you know, quick. Like I like that. It's easy
Yeah,
to
I
read and
think you
keeps.
gotta keep. We all have such short attention spans these days. I think you gotta drop a little breadcrumb for somebody to go, well,
Yeah,
just one more chapter.
yeah. It's interesting. The reason I was asking about that was because in a couple of recordings ago, I spoke to a lady and she's written a book in order for it to get picked up for as a screenplay, and she's actually structured the book as a almost like a screenplay. So she's done like 10 each. The book has 10 chapters and she's expecting each chapter to be an episode, and that's
Oh,
how
that's
she's kind
smart.
of struck that's kind of how she structured her novel, so she can just give it to people. And I thought, well, that's kind of starting at the end point, isn't it? It's good.
Well, it's funny because I sort of like the entirety of this book was the first season of this show
Hmm.
that I was pitching, so it's all there. That whole first season would have been this first book, and then of course there would have been subsequent seasons in book. I intend on writing another one. I intend to at least write one more and see how that one goes because I want to see if it's possible. One of my favorite writers is Robert Parker, and he wrote
Okay.
Spencer novels, which was a detective series. And I that just I like these characters. I'm in love with this place they live, and I just think
Hmm.
it's. I don't want to give up on it just yet. I want to see what happens to everyone next.
Yeah, yeah. I'm reading the J.K. Rowling Strike books at the moment, and they're amazing.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
really good at creating that sort of worlds and characters. They're really good.
Hmm.
Um, in your book, the main character Mason, he's
Yes.
kind of like a washed up actor in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is he based on anyone you know?
He's a combination of a few people I know. Hollywood is such a cruel business in a way
Yeah,
because you can be so typecast so easily, or you get just a little too old, and you could be, I mean, I've had a friend, I won't say his real name, but let's say his name is John Smith. I mean, he got a call from his agent and said, just like in the book, they're looking for a John Smith type. You got to get over there. And he's like, they're looking for a John Smith type. I am John Smith. I'm
yeah,
perfect. And he got over there and they said, "Oh, you're too old." Like,
right.
okay. It's an industry that somewhat despises age, and despises, you know, certain attributes that people are applauded for when they're younger, but then when they get older, not so much.
Hmm.
So he finds himself in that position. He's had a very successful run on a TV show for 12 years where he plays a sheriff in an old West town.
Yes.
And he's so identified with that character, it was so popular, it's just tough for him to parlay that into a new show or, a new anything. So he's kind of stuck in that and sort of makes a living, not makes a living, but supplements his income because he made pretty good money doing the show by doing autograph shows. And I know a number of actor friends that do those and make a lot of money doing it.
What's an autograph show?
Well, they go to these conventions where they'll have especially in the U.S. I know they do them in
Oh,
Europe,
like
but
Comic Conners.
it's stuff like
Yeah.
that where
Right.
you go and you sit, and then people come along and they pay $20 and you sign a photo for them or whatever. And
Yep.
some people make tens of thousands of dollars in a weekend just doing
Yeah.
that.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But in the book, as you read, COVID puts an end to that pretty quickly, and then when COVID's over, and that all comes back, it comes back very slowly, and people are just not in, they just don't have the same priorities as they did before COVID. Everything's different. People are still nervous about being in large crowds and being around people and shaking hands and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that impacts his income. And then, I won't give it away, but he finds out something else has happened that puts him in very dire financial trouble.
Yeah.
And that's why he ends up going back to his hometown of Long Branch, Georgia.
I'm smiling because that's kind of the part I'm at now. So definitely don't give it away.
I won't.
Yeah. No, I'm really enjoying the book. I think it's really exciting. Like the chapters keep like skipping on, and like it's really good.
Well, somehow, and I don't know how it's happened. I've been tracking sales, and 5% of my sales are in the UK. I don't know how
Okay.
that's really happened, but that's awesome. And then another 5% in Germany, and then
Oh,
another
that's
3
really
or
interesting.
4% somewhere else, maybe Australia.
Yeah.
Because I think
Is
I
your
did
book
it
translated in
podcast.
German?
No, it's all
You
only
should definitely
English.
do that.
Yeah.
It's quite cheap to do, and I've had a few recommendations now. So I spoke to James Blatch last week. He's a thriller author, mostly around Air Force kind of books. They're really good. He's a British guy, and he translates his book into German. It now is something like 25% of his sales he picked up. So definitely do that. There's lots of ways of translating the book now. But yeah, no, I see that exact same thing. So with my books, I generally see about the percentage of my sales is roughly about the percentage of the population of the English-speaking world. So it actually does work out quite representative for me. I'm like 3% Australian, 8% UK, then like 80% US sort of thing.
Yeah. I've thought about having it translated into Spanish. My wife is from Mexico, and her whole family is asking me, when is it going to be in Spanish? I'm like, I don't know.
One thing if you are going to get it converted into German, he said get an Austrian translator, because if the German person does it, then they own the copyright. So
interesting.
There's your tip for the day.
Very good to know.
Yeah. So talking about the marketing of the book, so it's interesting that you're making the sales in the UK. Have you done anything for that, or is that just literally organic sales have just been coming that way?
It's just organic sales. I don't know if it's word of mouth. I don't know. I mean, I've done a number of podcasts so far. I think this is my first UK podcast that I know of.
Right.
Or remember. I might have done one for Australia now that I think about it. But I don't know. I guess people are catching on to it,
Yeah.
I mean, I was just looking at the Amazon reviews yesterday, and every single review is 5 stars. I'm just thrilled at the response that people, and they're all excited about it, which is wonderful. Gives me a good feeling. I didn't write this book to make a fortune, because I know that isn't how it works. But I just wanted to get it out of me. Like I sort of when and I do the same thing with screenwriting. If I have an idea that I can't shake, then I write it. I have to write it, because if I don't write it, it'll haunt me, So I just wanted to get it out, and also I was curious, could I do it? Like, could I write a book?
How many words is the book overall?
I think it's about 83,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. And so did it take you a long time? How long did it take you to write the whole thing?
Less than 2 years. As you know, you go through so many revisions. You go over and over and over. My wife bought me a long time ago. She bought me a little thing I keep in my office. It's a little plaque. It says, "Write without fear and edit without mercy."
Yes.
So that's kind of my mantra. Like, I'll just write, and I don't care if it doesn't quite make sense to me the first time. I go back through it. It makes more sense.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's have a think about the marketing for the book. So you mentioned before, you're talking about you've all got 5-star ratings. That's amazing. Did you do anything to get those reviews in the first place? Do you have like an advanced reviewer team, or did you literally just put it out there and say, let's wait?
No, I just started selling the book, and you always start with because I self-published. I had a choice when I completed the book. I sent it, a friend of mine who's a published author, I asked him for an editor, because I was mostly concerned about formatting, because I know formatting a novel is very different from a screenplay. So I got a recommendation for this editor, woman named Cara Highsmith, and she went through the whole thing, and she, made all those adjustments that they do, and found my typos and all that good stuff.
Make sure the timelines match up.
Yeah. And she got back to me, and she said, this is a really good book. I think you could sell this. I'd like to recommend you to an agent, a publishing agent. So she did. And I sent it to this man in Florida who read it, had the same response. He said, "I really like this book. I really think you got something here." And he said, "But let me give you the negative side of it." The negative side of it is first time fiction publisher, first time fiction author, you're going to struggle with publishers because even if they buy it and decide to publish it, it could be 2 years before they actually release it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they may not put enough behind it to make anything happen with it. And they're going to take almost all the royalties.
Right.
So he goes, I would suggest for your first time, just put it out yourself and see what happens, you know. I mean, I'm lucky that I have had some success in the world of entertainment already that I can use those connections, you know, to help promote the book and talk about the book and get it out there. And so far it's worked. And that's kind of all I've done. I mean, I've run a few social media ads and things like that. And then just about a month ago, Joe Montaigne recorded the audio version of the book.
Oh, nice.
That'll be out probably in September. And then I'll probably do a broader marketing campaign once I have that, because then I'll have it in audio, paperback, and also e-format.
Yeah. Great. You got to use your unfair advantages. You know, if you've already got these connections in Hollywood, you might as well use them. But
yeah,
that doesn't, you know, some of the other tactics you talked about, there's nothing that anyone else couldn't do. So with the Facebook, you said you did social media marketing. So how did they perform? Did you track the results at all? Or?
You know, it's all, I mean, all that stuff is a little above my pay grade. So all I do, you know, like I'd post something on Facebook and then Facebook would say to me like, oh, would you like to boost this post? Okay. Yeah. You know, and then you allocate a certain amount of money over a certain period of time that you are willing to spend to boost that post. And they give you, you know, they give you statistics. They'll say, well, you had 1,000 clicks today or 2,000 clicks or whatever it is. What I would do is I would look at book sales, and I could always tell like, oh, I sold a few books, you know, this afternoon or whatever. So I knew that it was working a bit. And I think for anybody else who doesn't have, you know, the connections maybe that I have, it's just about being tenacious. I mean, you have to, you have to press people sometimes. You know, you got to call your friends and family and say like, look, I wrote a book. You guys, you know, you got to buy it. It's only $17. Come on, you know. And then you got to get them to read it, and then you got to get them to leave the review too. You know, I've still got family members. I have one family member. I think she bought 12 books to give to all her friends, and she loved the book so much. And I still haven't gotten her to write a review. I'm like, she's my aunt, and I'm like, will you please just write the review? Oh, I just love your book. I will. I promise. I promise. Like, okay. All right, auntie, you know.
I'm exactly the same. And also it's a bit awkward asking, isn't it? Because you're kind of asking for like a, you know, people are like, oh, I'm giving you a 5-star review for something I don't really know. It's like, well, just read it. And if you like it, then give it a 5-star review. It makes you feel better. I just need my reviews so that other people can buy it.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't want anybody to get a review that hasn't read it. I mean, but she's read it and she just was raving about it and she bought 12 copies for her friends, but I can't get her to leave a review. She's almost 90, so I give her a pass.
So I think some things that could work really nicely for your sort of style of books is there's like quite a few newsletter type businesses where they basically have an audience of people who love a particular genre of book. So yours would probably be in like the crime sort of genre. So people that love those books, they really want to get hold of those copies when they're either on a discounted price or like free when you're launching. And the best thing about that is you often get quite a lot of reviews and you get really good feedback about the book too. So for your sort of book, I think it works really well. Okay. I do it myself with most of the non-fiction books, but it's great to get all these people to leave your reviews at first, especially if you haven't got the contacts like you have.
Yeah, and I also just got a great review from, I think it's called onlinebookclub.org. Yes. They gave me a beautiful 5-star review that I just got the other day. And I've entered, I don't know, half a dozen fiction contests. None have ended yet, so I don't know what's going to happen with those, but I just thought, why not, you know?
Okay, that's interesting. So how do they work? I haven't actually done one of those before.
So I've just started Googling and searching, and then sometimes, you know, the way our phones listen to us, now that I talk about it, I'll probably get 5 pop-up messages now on something. But there's a number of like book publishing contests especially for self-published authors. Mm-hmm. There's Indie Book Awards. There's, I'd have to look now. There was about a half a dozen that I entered. The Global or Impact Book Awards, that's another one that I entered. You know, you pay $50, $60, whatever it is, and you submit your manuscript and the cover, and you pick your category, and then you wait for them to review it and decide if you are the winner that year or
Yeah.
that
You don't have to bribe anyone.
quarter.
It does
I'm sorry.
you don't have to bribe anyone or anything like that. It's a genuine award.
Yeah, it seems to be. Yeah, I mean, I have a few friends that have written books, and these were sort of the ones that they recommended, so that's why I did them.
Great. Okay. I'll put the name of those award things in the show notes so people can have a
Okay.
look at those too. Maybe vote for you too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I'd like to talk a bit more about the actual book itself. In the book, you've got some different themes, like as you mentioned before, COVID, and also the fact that there's like people getting too old for their jobs, and there's lots of those sort of themes going throughout the book. How did you decide on those themes beforehand, or was it something that you wanted to pull out when you were writing, or is it just something that came as you were writing the book out?
I think mostly it came as I was writing, but
Yeah.
When I've been in this sort of business for over 20 years now, and I've seen a lot of this happen, and so they always say write what you know, right? So
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of times really wonderful actors who don't work, and I just don't understand it. And you talk to agencies, and well, he's not a big enough name. I have an actor friend of mine who is just a wonderful actor and had a really great career going in Broadway and all kinds of movies and stuff, and then it just sort of paused for some reason, and I don't really know why. But he went on an audition. Was going out on an audition for a commercial, and it was like a national commercial. It was like a big national beer commercial or something, and it would have paid very well. The first question they asked him was, "How big is your social media following?"
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well," he goes, "if they said if you don't have at least 100,000 followers, then don't even bother coming in."
Yeah.
And that's very sad to me. Now we're basing everything on that. Like, I don't know. That sort of ignores talent completely.
Yes, I agree. It's difficult, isn't it? You kind of have to do it, but you don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, I vote we all go back to flip phones. That's my position.
Yeah, there's a big movement at the moment to try and get people back onto dumb phones. To get them stop.
I mean, so many people have developed such a short attention span to things that, and I think in schools these kids all of a sudden. I mean, I grew up in the '70s and '80s, and I mean, I don't remember any kids that had ADHD or anything like that. You were just kids, and you did your schoolwork, and you went and you played and you did your thing, and now all these kids have this condition, and I have to believe that cell phones have a lot to do with that, and pads, and the rapidness of information that I've seen kids, they're watching a video, and if 3 seconds they're not entertained, man, they're on to the next video. Like,
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's something I struggle with, focus and stuff. You're always checking a phone and don't want to be. It's rubbish.
Yeah.
In the book as well, Long Branch, the town is set in Long Branch, and that is quite a small, like, I guess, corrupt town. Maybe there's lots of tension, like, in the town. Was that on purpose to put it in somewhere small like that, so kind of everyone knows each other, or is it just somewhere you knew?
It's based on a real town, and I wouldn't call it a corrupt town. I would say there is corrupt people in the town. The town, for the most part, is not corrupt.
Yeah.
But it's based on a town. So I was working in Georgia a few years ago on a TV show, and it was south of Atlanta, which is a huge city in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And it was a small town called Hamilton, Georgia. And it's basically just like I described in Long Branch. There's about 1,500 people that live there. It's very rural. People have pecan farms and cattle, and it's like very country, as we would say here. And so I was down there doing a show for a year with this family of hunters. They hunted turkey and deer and rabbit and whatever game, and they had already had a TV show about hunting, but this show was about them as a family, so it was more of a reality style show. I went down there maybe 4 times over the course of a year, and I always took my wife with me because we haven't been married that long, and we just wanted to stick together, And we both just fell in love with this town, and we had decided if that show that I was working on It only lasted one season, but if it would have continued, we would have bought a place there, at least to live there part time, because we just thought it was such a beautiful, such a stark contrast to Los Angeles, put it that way. Not crowded, lots of green, lots of trees, lots of water. None of those things exist here. So it was just a beautiful, beautiful place. And the people were fantastic. They were so friendly and they were so fun and nice. And, you know, it was just magical.
Yeah. Did you feel like in terms of the story, it wasn't, you didn't choose on purpose for its size or anything like that? It was just because you liked that place and it was good memories of it?
I think that I liked the idea that Mason was from a small town like that he had sort of changed. A little bit of me is in Mason, I got to say, because I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, not that small of a town, but certainly much smaller than Los Angeles. And so when I came to California, even though I was working in construction, I mean, I was very naive, and it was a bit of a culture shock coming from from a city of like maybe 1 million people to a city of like 15 million people. It was like, oh my God, you have to stand in line for everything here. I never stood in line in Kansas City. I liked the idea that here's this guy who is kind of a country boy, goes to Hollywood to follow his dream, becomes very successful, and then when he hits hard times, the first thing that really comes to his mind as a way to save himself is to go back to where he came from.
Yeah. And
try to reboot his life from there. I thought that was kind of an interesting, and I like those fish out of water kind of things. And so here's a guy, he's lived away from that little town for so long. He goes back and he's got to readjust now to that life. Everything's a little slower. People like to chat with you at the grocery store instead of just be like, here's your change, get out. You know, it's just a different life.
Yeah. I found that exact same thing when I moved from London to Yorkshire. Now everyone just wants to talk to me even when I go to the supermarket.
Yes, exactly. My wife, who is from Mexico, when we go to Kansas City, first time we went to Kansas City to visit my family, we went to a grocery store, and the cashier started talking. He was like, how are you all? What are you doing? Are you from out of town? And we left, and she goes, what was that all about? Why did she talk to us like that?
Yeah.
That's folksiness. People want to chat here. You got to let them have something to talk about.
Yeah. I like that. I just love that in this small town, because you kind of feel that sort of enclosed sort of feeling. And I think sitcoms use that quite a lot, where they've got this small place where everyone's kind of stuck and they can't move out. And so it's like, it creates those tensions. I really like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just coming towards the end of the book. So was the end of the show, sorry. What plans have you got next for books? Have you got more in the same series, or are you writing some?
Yeah, I'd like to write a follow-up to the first book. I mean, I think there's more story to tell, and when you get to the end of the book, that'll make sense to you. And I probably, there was a time when I thought I should just keep going with this first book and make it a larger book, but I think it would have been far too large. And I think around 300 to 350 pages is plenty for a book.
Yeah.
And people have told me it's a very easy read. It's like a summer read. Like, you don't have to be a brain surgeon to get through it. It keeps you engaged and interested, which is great. I love to hear that. But I think there's more story to tell with the main characters, and I think that there's some fun to be had there with those people. And I liked it. I like that world. I like that place, and I like those people. And it may sound weird to someone, but when you create a little world and you create these characters, they're like real people to you. To me, they're real people, and I feel like I got to help them tell the next chapter of their story.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, no, so I look forward to reading those. I'm enjoying it so far. So just last week, have you got any experience you'd have any advice you'd give to aspiring writers who are just starting out? Is there anything that you thought now that you kind of wish you did that would really help people out?
I would say, like I kind of alluded to before, you write what you know. Like I kind of based Mason Powell a bit on myself, partially because I thought to myself, what better way to know what this guy would do next? All I have to do is ask myself, what would I do next? And there's my answer, know? So I think that's always helpful. Number one, to write about things that you're familiar with or that you know. And secondly, you can't be afraid. You just got to go for it, and don't second guess yourself. Don't try to edit while you write, because that's the worst thing you can do. Just tell the story and let it unfold, and you can go back later and edit. And then I would say, lastly, one thing that I've always done in writing from television to the novel is whatever I'm working on that day, when I'm ready to finish for the day of writing, I don't finish until I know what I'm going to write next.
Right. Okay.
Because if I know, okay, this is what I'm going to do next, then I'll get back to the typewriter. I'll get back to the computer faster than if I don't. Like if I get to a point where I'm like, gee, I don't know what happens next. Let me think about it. I'll get back to it, but it's going to be a few days probably.
Yeah.
But
John
if
Cleese
I know,
wrote about that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, John Cleese wrote about that in his book Creativity. I've got it up here somewhere. It's a really good book. It's like that long. It's great. And he basically was talking about when he was writing Monty Python, he was with Graham Chapman, how he'd always like write before he went to bed, because he felt like somehow his subconscious was like working on it in the background when he wasn't there. And he'd wake up like just ready to go with it. And he knew exactly what he was going to start on. So that is great advice that you just gave.
Yeah, I've done that too. I've woken up in the middle of the night and thought about like, oh, what if that happened? You know, I make a little note and go back to sleep or try to go back to sleep. But yeah, I think it's good to know what you're going to do next. And that gets you excited about writing again. I think that's important.
Brilliant. That's great advice. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
You're welcome.
Really enjoying reading the book. Just before we go, last question was, so is there any books that you think everyone should be reading that maybe they're not reading at the moment?
The last book I finished was a book called Happiness Falls. I'm going to say her name's Angie Kim.
Okay, right. I didn't know that one.
It's a fairly new book. It's a good mystery book with an interesting sort of twist to it. And then I'm in the middle of an Elmore Leonard book, Fire in the Hole, which is basically a series of short stories. One of them, the TV show in the United States, Justified, was a very big television show here, and one of the short stories in that book is the basis of that show. So I love the show, so I got interested in the book and thought I would read that.
Great. Yeah. There's some great recommendations there. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for joining me on the call. It's been lovely speaking to you, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks for having me on.